And so we come to our last but not least. I think I'm going to get my geek on a little bit as well, because I'm obviously an SEO first amongst many things. So the final topic for our presentation is how to align your editorial strategy. How to align your editorial strategy with a better search generative experience. Today, we're going to be doing this in a Q&A format. And the way that we sort of, just to give, again, a synopsis, we've got two sides of the argument, one positive, one negative. Obviously, there's been a bit of discussion about how many of our publishers are having concerns for search, particularly because it's been the most dramatically impacted. On one hand, we've got have Kiff, Newby. He's the head of audience growth from News Corp Australia. On the other hand, we have Nikki, Chowdhury, who's it's the SEO lead and AI. So maybe I'll leave you two guys to allow yourselves to. I'll pass it to you both to first give a bit of an introduction and sort of the sides that we're going to speak about today. Maybe I'll pass it over to Nikki to start off with.
Thanks. That was a pretty good introduction, actually. So I'm Nikki. I lead audience for Vogue Australia. I oversee our SEO strategy, AI implementation in our workflow and potentially on the website very soon, and also our shopping content, which involves reviews and affiliates.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. So I'm Kiff Newby. So I work in the technology, data and digital department of News Corp, and I'm responsible for audience growth, which is largely and primarily SEO focused, so technical SEO and strategic SEO.
Well, thank you. So Kiff, we'll start with you with a few of the questions, because when we had our chat prior to the call, I guess there was more concern rather than optimism towards such generative experience, particularly because news is more of a lead indicator for that, and your focus is more on news. So I guess what has News Corp, or what have you sort of looked at in terms of mitigations to understand the impact of that for top stories, and how does that compare to your maybe your global counterparts? Have you spoken to them? Have they given you any sort of indication of feedback?
Yeah, well, there probably couldn't be a bigger issue in SEO in terms of setting a 2 or 3 year strategy. Ever since Bard came through and Google responded, perhaps somewhat hastily to the idea that they might lose market share, we've been looking at the search generative experience. I mean, we're limited, obviously, by not being able to have access to labs in our territory. Even with the expansion to 120 countries, still Australia can't have a look at it. So we're quite reliant on the analysis that's coming through from our US counterparts. And yet, I mean, to your sort of framing of the positive and the negative, as we sort of talked about the other day, in some senses, you can think of it as a massively expanded, featured snippet. And featured snippets can offer some real benefits in, brand awareness and visibility, and building up a sense of authority around a topic, not so much in Google's algorithm, but in the audience that's searching. But we work mostly with brands that already have a lot of visibility, and really we're very traffic sensitive economically. So in that sense, it's hard not to see it as probably a net negative for the publishing industry, certainly the publishing industry that's working at the sort of scale we are, that's not going to get so much value just from visibility and is looking for the referral. And to sort of start with where we're looking at how we mitigate, first, we've got to size what the impact is. And really there we're focusing mostly on, we're seeing very, very different behavior. I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with the SGE experience, but there's sort of 3 stages. There's no SGE, here's a fairly standard SERP layout, but would you like SGE? And then there's the SGE presented front and center. And incidentally, we're just seeing patents come through from Google where they're talking about personalizing those SGE front and center experiences based on the level of familiarity people have with the subject matter that they're queried against. So it's going to be quite hard to determine exactly what that content is at scale. Now, the way we tend to look at it is it's really query intent based. So we're seeing a huge amount of variability between taking a basket of keywords where we might say there's news intent queries versus, let's say, shopping or e-commerce research, real estate research, top funnel, middle funnel, down funnel. They're all offering varying ratios of how prominent the SGE experience is going to be. And what we're seeing so far is that news is, shall we say, fairly cautious. And I think Google is, after having rushed the labs into market, is probably taking a fairly cautious approach for a number of reasons, and is not necessarily in a rush to get to a full commercialized product out there in the market, and in news even more so. So I won't go to the exact numbers, but we're talking about, in the early stages of the trial, it seems to be shifting, single figure percentages against a basket of news intent keywords for an automated default SGE presentation. But the concern or the challenge is that, when you talk about, well, how often do they say that they can generate an SGE experience, it's up closer to 70-80%. This is a huge latitude there between the sort of impacts we might see when they finally decide on their rollout. And it's also going to be a case of really tracking user behavior. And look, the data, we hope that when Google does go into market, they're also going to give us a sufficient set of analytics for us to really understand what the audience behavior and performance is. But that optional presentation of SGE is going to make a big impact, I'd say, on the final change in our traditional click curve and rankings, and top stories, click-through rates, and to see where we eventually land in terms of traffic. So that's sort of, there's a lot more in there, but in terms of taking the negative view, I mean, personally, I find it hard to not see it as anything other than a challenge.
Absolutely. And so let me bring briefly Nikki into this as well, and let's tie this again together, because typically sometimes SEOs would see feature snippets with 0-click searches and so forth. So maybe Nikki, could you start off with your perspective on, because you said you mentioned that you work more on the e-comm and evergreen side, maybe how you see that brands and maybe the titles that you're working on can work around that, and Kiff, I'll come back to you on that afterwards. So yeah.
Well, I guess I'll first speak to what the Google experience is like for most people now. I wouldn't say that it's a great experience. You go onto a SERP, you see a bunch of ads at the top, then you see a bunch of blue links, you have to click through, and most of them have, another set of referral links. So there's a lot of ad experience on the SERP page. And I think for the next generation of users, that's just not what they're looking for. And even though it's been the interface to brands for the last decade, the main interface to finding brands and websites, we are seeing that change. So I think in 2021, I mentioned with our talk previously that the VP of product at Google said that 40% of Gen Z start their search on TikTok and Instagram. So there is this demand for search content. Even though TikTok doesn't brand itself as a search engine, it's being used as such. There is a demand for content and a search platform that is visually engaging, real-time, and includes a viral and user responsive kind of side to the content instead of just having a bunch of blue links. So obviously search generative, it is going to change the amount of traffic that we get to our websites. But I think the bigger question here is, if less people are searching in that way, those audiences are going somewhere. And I think it's important for brands to be very agile in how they think about their search content. So we are less to do with news. We do a lot more evergreen at Vogue. I also oversee the SEO for GQ as well. So for us, evergreen content and being authorities on a specific niche is kind of what the brand legacy is all about. And I do think for brands that really have a specific niche, this could be a really big opportunity. So with the generative part of search that Google's bringing out, we are seeing publishers being highlighted in a kind of different way than before. And it's at the top, it's kind of very specific to the topic you're searching to. So if you're searching for skincare, for example, you do see more publishers than e-com stores being referenced with their SEO content. So now if you go on to search, you do see a lot of e-com brands who are writing their own affiliate content. And for a user, that's not always the best experience because you're basically reading an ad. So there is a demand, I think, from consumers to get content that's user verified. So if it's not user generated, from a brand that they trust. But also going beyond just blue links. They want to see a human being. They want to see the product being used. And so for us, we do a lot of affiliate content. We do a lot of review content. So for us, it's kind of meant, how do we evolve how we already do things to adapt to this audience demand for video, for UGC? And for us, we've seen a lot of success when we go more from brand to the actual editors that we have on our teams. And it lets us kind of play in the UGC space without actively being UGC creators, because we highlight our editors as real people who are really trying products. So yeah, I guess it is kind of a loss in one way, but it's also a gain in a different way. And our job as publishers has always been to be where the audiences are. And if less people are getting the results they want from Google search, we have to respond to that. And I mean, Google's also responding to that. So the partnerships between Google and TikTok, for example, they are anticipating for this change. They're anticipating that people are searching with more natural language. They're anticipating that people want video content and first-person reviews. And as publishers, we've done things a certain way for a long time, especially reviews and especially kind of brand-led content. And it hasn't always meant that it's the best type of content. I mean, we know as SEO people, good SEO doesn't necessarily mean it's the best piece of content. So for us, it's always about, if audiences are demanding trust, authority, if they're demanding first-person reviews, and if they're demanding a human being on the other end of the screen, we need to adapt what we already have. And that sometimes means creating the same type of content in a different platform. So short form video, obviously there's a big focus for us there, but also kind of layering our content types, having a web page, having UGC in the web page, having that web page adapted for TikTok, adapted for video. So I guess for us, it's a creative exercise and a problem solving opportunity. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited for that because I think we've done things in the same way for such a long time. And I almost think that we've gotten a bit complacent. We've kind of been just churning out content that's so easy to automate that there isn't a reason to go to web pages anymore. And if Google can create the equivalent of your content, I think that really does bring into question, is your content going far enough to differentiate itself? Is it incentivizing people to come through to your website? And that's a threat for us, but an opportunity to be better publishers.
Love the optimism and the problem-solving mindset. Kiff, from your perspective, particularly for news, particularly as we know, sometimes the search behavior, typically someone goes back and researches, if an event happens, someone then goes back and researches the backstory. What's your thoughts on sort of how to tackle the zero-click searches and SGE in that context, and maybe anything else that you might consider as advice for addressing zero-click searches?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you're talking about tactics, and the tactics will emerge. But I'd absolutely pull out from Nikki's statement. A couple of things she said really chime with me there. It's important to see this in a larger context. And the larger context is Google is struggling with the search experience, and the content community is struggling to provide through the search experience things which are actually satisfying to the user. And we're constantly trying to evolve that. And we have exactly the same strategy broadly. We're looking more and more at search across TikTok and social platforms, because that's where the behavior is going, because people are looking for different search experiences. So this SGE is just one part of an evolution that Google's trying to make to keep search relevant. And I don't think it'll be the only play. And I think SERPs are going to be very, very volatile in layout over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, and content will be volatile. And they're in their own internal war against not just the rise of AI generated content, which is already cannibalizing, and they're playing whack-a-mole trying to keep that under control, but the influence of, I guess, AI-like production procedures that Nikki's referencing, producing boilerplate content out of publishing that really doesn't satisfy an audience, even under the traditional SERP. But to get back to the tactics, look, I think the EEAT focus and the fundamentals of ranking are still going to sit there underneath the SGE. And we're really talking about a SERP change. And that extra, so all of the foundation is still going to be there. That extra layer is going to be, we are looking at this SERP change. And, initially they didn't really bring in anything in terms of, referral attribution and prominent, carousel style click-through. That they've gone there now. But the real question is going to be whether the ranking inputs that actually take content and make it likely to be featured within an SGE snippet at that sort of above the foundation of ranking, that final last mile, if you like, and therefore being featured in the snippet, offering that click-through opportunity, whether that's going to be understandable in the same way that we do understand fairly well how to rank in top stories, carousels, signals of freshness, signals of topic authority, whether all of that still comes into play when we're looking at how content gets merged, mushed, treated as training data, and then regurgitated in these SGE environments. So I don't think we're going to know until we get experience of that at scale, and we start getting the data back to really crack that last mile piece of ranking.
Understood.
Did I actually answer your question?
Somewhat, but I think leaning more towards, you said, because we're going to go more towards the tactics, like particularly the news experience for search, how typically someone wants to go backwards and understand.
Yeah. So we've all exploited the explainer market for a while. And I think, we talk about query intent. So, everybody, we still see the main volume in simple entity-based search. So the last couple of days, let's say Bruce Lemon. But immediately you get sort of follow-up angles based on, where he lives, how much his rent was worth, backstory, family background, all of those sorts of things. And we've been able to mop up and produce service and utility journalism, and utilize our topic authority to really target that sort of content and follow-up query as well. And increasingly, it's more and more about the angles you choose to take post the sort of trunk, who, what, where, when, why, that actually give you the success in search. I think that is going to be challenged by summaries. So we're going to have to rethink a little bit, how we produce a range of coverage that, satisfies our readers, but equally starts to play into different approaches that are going to work in this SGE environment.
Okay, I guess still watch this space from what it sounds like. Okay, Nikki, there's on the sorry, you spoke about reviews, affiliate content. We're seeing perspectives come into the fold a lot more and all that. So how can brands and sites position themselves better, in your opinion, moving forward?
I think Perspectives is a really exciting tool for legacy brands in particular, and an opportunity to play in platforms that are dominated by user-generated content. So you've got YouTube, TikTok, those platforms are dominated by user-generated content. So Perspectives is an opportunity to, I guess, humanize your brand once again and to play with different platforms and different modes of content. We have a lot of standard web page affiliate kind of reviews on the site. So for us, it's about how do we highlight these stories in a way that works with UGC and on platforms that maybe we haven't really explored in that way before. So we know with Perspectives, it'll be highlighting different voices, different perspectives, and mostly gathering content from forums and social media. So for us, it's just about making sure that those pieces of content are found. So you're applying almost the same SEO practices across all these different platforms. I mean, the SEO basics of having, long tail keywords, making sure that you've transcribed what's being said in the video, making sure that your images have alt text. I mean, it's all the basic SEO things. You're just kind of applying it to every single platform to make sure that Google is able to find it and highlight it. So I guess that's a big part of it, is educating our teams on the basics of search optimization across various platforms, and making sure that they have that knowledge and they're not just thinking of SEO as this is something you do for a page on our website. This is something that you do across every platform ever. And I think the second thing is to keep up with the demand for content. So consumer demand for content is just insane, and it's very hard for most teams to keep up with creating video content, podcasts. I mean, the list gets longer and longer every day. So for us, we kind of feel like we're at a pretty special time, because while the demand is growing, the tools to create these pieces of content are becoming better. So I think for us, a big part of it is making sure that teams are upskilling, like they're learning how to find gaps in their workflow and their content creation, whether that's finding, peer-reviewed journals that support a product. If you're writing about beauty, for example, making sure that you're researching and using these tools to help you research and to improve the authority, the trust, and all of those aspects of your work. But also just streamlining things like alt text. There are really great AI scripts now where you can just put a picture in and it will generate alt text for you. It's a pretty tedious job, and it's kind of boring for teams. And it's also something that they have to do more and more and more. So finding those gaps to help automate and streamline the content creation process is actually helping us be more agile and helping us be present across different platforms. So that's something we're really exploring with our e-com shopping content. How can it live on TikTok? We know that Pinterest is a huge platform for shopping and a huge platform for image search. We know that Instagram became a huge hub for shopping, and I can very much see that happening on TikTok now. Creators have Amazon storefronts. So we're trying to find where our audiences shop, and not just on search on Google, but on TikTok, on potentially Instagram Shorts and Instagram, and making sure that we're trying to divide our content up across these different platforms. So whenever people search and wherever they search, they're finding us. And it's a lot harder to compete in this space if you're not really a brand that has that brand authority. So for us and the zero-click experience, that's a huge threat, obviously, because people are not leaving SERPs to go to websites. So I think there's going to be a big focus on brand marketing and not just performance marketing, where you're really trying to be in your audience's mind at every point of search. So when they do search, they're thinking, I'm searching in this specific niche, whether it's beauty or fashion. For us, those are our niches, really. We want them to search with Vogue and GQ in mind. And we actually think this could be a great opportunity, because personalization is great. It tells you exactly what you've bought and what you should buy according to Google, according to your own taste. But when it comes to fashion and beauty, you actually do trust authority figures. Sorry, it's my alarm. You do trust authority figures. So you might actually want to know what a brand like Vogue, or I guess if you're in e-commerce, what a brand like Sephora might have to say about the best products. And if you're in fashion, GQ and Vogue. So we just really want to make sure that we are kind of not just there when they come upon us. They're thinking of us at the beginning of the shopping journey and at the beginning of the funnel. So wherever they're searching and wherever they're looking for advice, they want our advice. And that's a very long-term project, but it just starts with being everywhere your audience is. So they're seeing you on Instagram, on TikTok, not in an obtrusive way, but in a way that they kind of just have you in the back of their mind when they're shopping at all times. And we already see this on basic search. So we have a lot of brand-led searches. So people do search, Vogue jeans, Vogue moisturizers, Vogue sunscreens. So for us, it's not a huge leap. And that's just a lucky thing for being a legacy brand of, 100 plus years. But I do think that this is something that smaller brands can also leverage, especially if you have a point of difference. If your brand is known for sustainability, or if your brand is known for having specific values, I think value-led searches are also getting quite popular. So, it's all a challenge and an opportunity at all times. But for us, it's just making these little tweaks to how we do things, and hoping that, it works. Because as Kiff said, it's all experimentation, right? Like this whole industry is experimentation and trying and changing. And there'll be a lot more of that maybe in the next year than we're used to. But we've done it before. We made the leap from web pages to sharing on Facebook. We made the leap from web pages sharing on Instagram. We made the leap from newspapers to websites. So the industry has evolved with audiences for many, many years. And I think that we are more than capable of doing it in the next 24 months, for sure.
Thanks, Nikki. I think that's a really good closing remark. And yeah, sorry, Kiff over to you.
Yeah, can I just pick up on one? I think the UGC theme is really interesting. And I think if you look across a lot of these, thematic changes in the industry and thematic changes in the platforms and their algorithms that we're looking for, what they're trying to deal with is almost to get to the authority of more personalized content. I mean, that was rife in the helpful content update and the reviews update. Everything is they're looking for the direct experience of a person with a subject. And that's a really interesting challenge for us, to maintain an institutional voice of the brand, but to bring those individual voices within the brand to the fore. Because I think, across the board, that's going to be algorithmically a place we need to go in content strategy over the next 2 or 3 years. And it's something we're talking about very actively across all of the newsrooms, bringing through talent and letting talent express itself in a far greater variety of digital ways than we perhaps have done in the past.
We've got a few minutes left, so I just want to pass it over just for Q&A. There's a ton more things that we could have spoken about. I've spoken to you guys separately at length of other things, but maybe we could pass it over to the audience with their questions on maybe immediate challenges or immediate advice they can get with this current changing landscape.
But just in lieu of a question, to your point of immediacy, I think we've still got a bit of time. I think Google moved into the market quickly, but they're very aware that, news in particular is a difficult space to operate in. You're open to liability. Hallucinations are a massive problem. Equally, I think they probably feel broadly regulatorily exposed over the long term for the use of the content industry's content to generate their own. And it's no secret that, in our head office, there are negotiations going on. Robert Thompson's always spoken publicly that they're in negotiations with large content providers to build out some sort of commercial arrangement that would perhaps set a regulatory framework as well. So I think we've got a bit of time.
Yeah, definitely there is, but it just, it's more of a warning for us to get moving, not maybe as long as the mobile first index. That took 10 years, but maybe a bit more sooner than that. But okay, I think with that, sorry, there's no questions, but we're pretty much out of time. So Kiff, Nikki, really appreciate your time, and definitely reach out. Sorry, everyone on the call as well, definitely connect with Nikki and Kiff. I've had extensive conversations on Search, so they're very knowledgeable in this space. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to just conclude the event for today. I'd like to thank all our sponsors and all our partners that have especially gave us the opportunity to make this event to the point, very productive and hopefully helpful to our audience. So thank you to Azoic, our main principal sponsor, Source Fabric, SmartOco, and Glide for being supporting partners. And with that, I wish you guys good day, good morning, good evening. For me, it's good night. So thanks everyone, and we'll speak soon.